The Freezing Rush Part 2 patch just dropped in Unite, and I'm going to give you my take on where I think everything sits in the meta in today's Pokemon Unite tier list. It's Monday. On Mondays, we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Made out with a hot dog. Oh my god, that was one time!
I'm going to start this a little differently than I do some of my tier lists. This is my tier list from the most recent Darkrai update. This is when Darkrai got those much needed and much overbuffed buffs. And now I'm going to move everything around based on what has happened here with Freezing Rush. I'm going to talk about every Pokemon briefly. If you want to hear my take on every single one of them with the Darkrai patch, you can watch that tier list. But this is going to be me updating our current tier list with what I think has happened with these Pokemon. So, where's a good place to start here? Well, let's start at the bottom. Why not? Because that's maybe where we'll see some of the most movement. Phalanx. I want to talk briefly about Phalanx. Phalanx hangs out. Oh, I forgot to tell you about our tiers. We have our God tier where we only put one Pokemon. We're not friggin' Norse around here. We have our S tier. These Pokemon are much better than the rest of the roster, maybe a little broken. We have our A plus tier. Extremely good, very, very viable picks. We have our A tier. Also quite solid, but I think the A plus tier kind of nudges them out a little bit. We have our B tier. Still got the B tier. We have our C tier. B tier is kind of like fine. We have our C tier, the Charizard tier, a tier named after Char because it was there for so long. Char's no longer there. These are kind of underwhelming. And then we have our D tier, the Decidueye Memorial tier, a tier named after Decidueye. When it was so bad, it had its own tier named after it. Okay, Phalanx is the only Pokemon I have in my Decidueye Memorial tier right now. And I don't think there's anything in the game that is so egregiously bad it can't be played, and I would include Phalanx in that. Phalanx is not that bad, but I do have to put Phalanx here because I think it is the most in need of attention by the developers out of every Pokemon. It is a pretty recent release. It came out this year. It is an amazing Pokemon. They nerfed it and left it alone. It is like, it never gets picked. It's never seen comp play. It's just like, please do something with this. All right, let's move up to our Charizard tier, where actually two of our Pokemon that we've had in our Charizard tier recently got buffs. Pretty sizable buffs. We have Greedent and Lapras. Greedent's weird. Moving on. No, Greedent is a weird one because no matter what you do to it, its role is always insane. However, I do think these are very solid buffs. Both of its kits got buffed as well as its Unite move. I think it's fair to say that for the job that Greedent does, it does it extremely well. I'm going to move Greedent up to our A tier right now with this sort of like warning. This is not a defender. This is a crazy harasser, annoyer, kind of secures objectives really well, especially with Covet Belch. This is a class all its own that it maybe hangs out in with Sableye. In that role, I think it's very, very good. Let's talk about Sableye really quick. Sableye also, I think, is pretty solid in its role. To be fair, I could probably move it to our B tier right here. And I think that's kind of reasonable. I also think every Sableye that's played by your allies is horrible, and the ones that your enemies play are either equally horrible or one of the best Sableye players in the world, and that's just how it goes. Goodra. Goodra is going to continue to hang out in our C tier right here. I think Goodra is unfortunately one of the most underwhelming tanks in the game in a lot of ways. However, I do think when played correctly, which nobody does, which is like trying to actually tank for your team rather than just trying to Dragon Pulse constantly, I think Goodra does all right. And I think some competitive teams could maybe make some cool things happen with Goodra, but I do think a lot of players are going to have trouble with Goodra, and it never seems to do well win rate wise. It's always low because it just doesn't do enough. It doesn't help your team in big enough ways. Our next Pokemon is Lapras. Lapras got really nice buffs. Like, finally, I want to pull up the buffs right here just so I can talk about it. Oh, maybe I have Unite DB ready to go. Yeah, Lapras. Lapras got defense buffs, special defense buffs, healing buffs on its basic. Like, this is huge, going from 2% to 3% of max HP. Bubble Beam, Perish Song, like, lots of great buffs. The boosted works for the Water Pulse build and Perish Song once it hit Perish Song Plus. The defenses are really nice. I think these are awesome buffs for Lapras. I'm going to move Lapras up to our A tier right here as well. Lapras could even be better than this. It might be an A+ defender right now. I really think you're going to see the meta kind of shake a lot with this Pokemon. Its win rate skyrocketed, which doesn't surprise me. This thing was so deserving of buffs. I'm so happy that they did it. So right now, I really only have 2 Pokemon kind of hanging out in our low tiers, which is Phalanx and Gudra. And to be fair, I could move Phalanx right here. I mean, I don't think these Pokemon are awful. I really don't. It does just feel like we've kind of forgotten about them a little bit. Talked about Sableye, Zeraora. Zeraora is a great speedster, but all speedsters are great when like they're doing well. It's fine. It's a good carry. I don't like it as much as probably any other speedster in the game, but when played properly, you can blow up an entire enemy team with a crazy ult. Blastoise. Blastoise got buffs. I'm going to move it up to our A tier as well. I do think this is kind of low A for me. I'm not sure how relevant the buffs are going to be, but it's way better than what it was. And interestingly enough, it does feel like the rapid spin build is actually what is getting a lot of play right now, and it seems to be doing all right. So the Blastoise buffs plus the bug fix that just happened, I'm going to move it up to our A tier. Glaceon. Glaceon is going in the A+ tier right here. I always worry about Glaceon getting buffs. It's such a simple Pokemon to use, and it got multiple buffs, leading me to place it much higher on the tier list. I think it is quite good. It's always quite distressing to see Glaceon doing well, but here we are. The auto attackers, Dragapult, Decidueye, Cinderace, and Duraludon, I think are all fine. I don't think any one of them is phenomenal. I think all of them can win games. Having something that can rip an objective is pretty decent. They all also have some form of secure. So I think they're all pretty good, but also as a role, it's just a weird role in the game right now. Scissor is okay. I just think there's so many better all-rounders. It's staying where it is. Tyranitar has been struggling. Ever since its nerfs, it's been struggling. It's a hard Pokemon to balance. It's either the king of everything or not doing too well. I'm going to leave it be. It's in the B tier. I'm going to leave it be. But I do think I don't think it's horrible. I just think, again, it's either its endgame is broken or why are we taking so long to get this thing online? Azumarill, on the other hand, got some nice buffs. I actually think this could move Azu maybe up into our A tier with a lot of these other really solid all-rounders. It feels like it kind of hangs out in a world with Lucario maybe a little bit. Luca's probably a bit better. This is like low A for me right now, but I do think it got some much needed buffs. So I'm going to move it up to our A tier for the time being and kind of see how I feel about it after, a couple weeks here. Machamp, I'm going to do the same. So here are my thoughts on Machamp. I think the change to Dynamic Punch was amazing. Cross Chop was already good. Excuse me, not Dynamic Punch, Close Combat. Dynamic Punch has been great. Cross Chop has been really good. And now Close Combat is really good. I think its Unite move change, while maybe on the highest level is a little bit of a nerf, I think for a lot of players, it seems like a buff. And I've noticed Machamps in my games connecting with their Unites a lot more. Its win rate is also moving up. I've had good games with it. I'm going to move it up into our A tier here and say it's a solid all-rounder right now. Sword and Buzzwole, I'm going to keep in B. Buzzwole mainly because people can't win with it, even though I do think it's really good. And Sword is kind of in there the same reason. Also, Ironhead is just bad on Sword, so I'm going to leave it in our B tier for now. Sword's probably just as good as the rest of these. I think all these all-rounders are pretty similar, though. Our A tier, Scyther, Talon, Absol, Gengar. I think these are all very solid speedsters. I don't think any of them are doing poorly. I think some of them are better in pub games, like just random queue games, and some of them are better in coordinated games, but all of them I think have decent value, strong speedsters, and I'm not really moving them around much. Our supporters, Comfey, Clefable, Wiggly, these are all great. Honestly, Wiggly might be even better. I think Wiggly might even be kind of up there in the A+ tier with some of these tanks. There are some things that kind of mess with it, but because it combos with Darkrai and it's just a pretty solid tank, I might even move Wiggly up here. I think it's really good. It's weird. Like when I see Wiggly, Slowbro, Maybe Mamoswine's a little better. We'll get to it here in a minute, but I think Wiggly's actually pretty solid right now. Blastoise Green we talked about. Snorlax got some buffs. I think they're nice. A tier seems fair to me. Crustle hanging out in the A tier. Yep, Lapras as well. And now let's get into our attackers here. We have Shandy, which I think is really good. Venu, good. Espeon got buffs. I think they're really solid buffs. I'm going to move Espeon up into our A+ tier. I think Psyshock could become a lane monster again. I think it's really solid. The secure is way back. You are so far away. The damage is solid. That little extra breakpoint, you just get all of the last hits from your opponents, and you're picking up KOs more. I'm going to move it up to our A+ tier. I'm going to do the same thing with Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir was always teetering on being one of the best in the game, especially after its Unite move change. And I think these little tweaks are really going to help Gardevoir out. Cram, I'm going to leave here. You might even be able to move Cram down. It's actually struggling quite a bit since its nerfs. But I do think a lot of people just kind of bounced off it. Delphox is crazy. Mewtwo Y. This is a hard one. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that my opinion on Mewtwo Y is that it was never as bad as people thought it was. I don't know if these buffs have made it A+. I think it maybe is still a strong A competitor. But Mewtwo Y has been good. It's just that it wasn't like you were playing Diablo and everyone else was playing a MOBA good, right? It wasn't you just A press and win, and because of that, people dropped off it. I could see a reality where it's moved up into the A+ tier here. I'm going to keep it A for now alongside Mewtwo X. I think these Pokemon are a lot better than people give them credit for. Dragonite, still really good. I played it after the nerfs, and I don't think there's really much to worry about with Dragonite. I think it's very solid. Lucario, I also think is solid with the buffs. I think Garchomp is a really good Pokemon, has been for a long time. Zarina, on the other hand, I actually am moving up into our A+ tier. I think Zarina is a lot better than people think, especially out here in the West, and I think a lot of the Eastern teams are showcasing just how monstrous this thing still is. In the hands of a skilled player, it's one of the best Pokemon in the game. Into our A+ tier. Ho-Oh is great. I put it A+ last time, and I'm going to leave it there. I still think what it does is kind of unparalleled, and there's still a reality where this is considered an S tier choice. In your random games, just pairing up solo, even duo, trio, it's probably more A+. Mamo, amazing, staying A+. Slowbro, great. Wiggly, welcome. Hoopa, Blissey, Eldegoss, all three of these Pokemon I think are staying in the A+ tier. If you want to make an argument that some of them are S, like I'm with you in some ways. Having a support, not having a support, game changing. These are amazing supporters. They do so much. I think the Blissey buffs were nice, but they really were just kind of reverting some nerfs that they had to give it because of Mewtwo a while back. Mime stays where it is. I think Mime's amazing. Speedster's up in our A+ tier. Leafeon, Zoroark, Dodrio, and Meowscarada. I think Leafeon, in the hands of a skilled player, right there with Zoroark, maybe one of the best things in the game sometimes, but I don't see it that often, and its win rate on both of these Pokemon don't reflect it. They are really high skill. Dodrio is close to this, but I don't think Dodrio is as good. I'm going to keep all three of these in A+. I'm going to move Meowscarada down. I do think it's one of the most slept on Pokemon in the game, but people are truly sleeping on it. They just don't play it very much, and they don't play it very well. I think it's unfortunate because this thing is incredible, but until it sees more play in the meta, it's hard to say where exactly it sits. I think it's incredible, but it just really doesn't get a lot of love. We just moved Espeon, Guardy up. Inteleon is definitely staying here, so is Mew. Sylveon, I'm actually going to move down to our A tier. I think Sylveon, I expected more out of the Hyper Voice version of Sylveon. I think it's really great, but I don't think people are playing it that well. And taking it from the position of carrying to supporting, you are going to be relying on your teammates more. You're going to be missing KOs where you otherwise would have got them. And if your team can't follow that up, well, maybe it is hurting a little bit. I still think it's actually crazy good, but it's not performing the way I expected. Pikachu got nerfed. I'm not moving it. I think Pikachu's incredible. It's probably going to hurt its win rate a little bit, but it's still a top tier support attacker alongside Alola Ninetales. In fact, A9, I think the biggest thing with A9 are those defensive changes. Dazzling Gleam Aurora Veil is a super slept on build. I think it's really strong, right? Like really strong, especially after those defense changes. Greninja, love Greninja. The Greninja's Unite move change is one of my favorite changes they've done in a little while. I just love how fast it is now. You unite every minute with this thing. Really solid. We already moved Glaceon up to A+. I hope it's not S. Serena's staying here. Metagross is staying here. Urshifu, now this is interesting. Urshifu's water win rate has dropped considerably, but Dark Punch Urshifu has risen. So I don't really know where to slot this. It's almost a little flavor of the week. I don't love playing Rapid Strike Urshifu. When I played it, it felt pretty good still, but clearly the cheesiness of that build is not really, it's not sticking, okay? It's just nacho cheese. So I'm going to move this down to A, and I'm going to keep Dark Bear here in A+. I'm going to keep Gyarados here in A+. I think Gary is still really, really good. Charizard. I'm moving Charizard down to A tier. It might, I don't think it's worse than this, but I do think the few times I've messed with it since its nerfs, I actually do think those nerfs kind of hurt Char a lot. It was probably very fair because this thing was crushing it, but I think the changes to Char actually hurt it quite a bit. Mimikyu, it's either A+ or S. It depends who is piloting this thing, and it also depends kind of what's on the other side. I don't feel like it's S, but boy, into unskilled players, it's one of the meanest Pokemon maybe of all time. So into unskilled players, or if it gets a really strong early lead, this feels like a clear S tier, and if it doesn't, it feels like it's really good. So I'm going to keep it top of A+. Umbreon, one of the best tanks in the game, S. Trevenant, one of the best tanks in the game, S. I love these two Pokemon. I think they're amazing. Miraidon got nerfs. And it got nerfs. Here, let me pull it up here. It got nerfs to a lot of what was going on with Miraidon. Where are you, buddy? Miraidon. Here we go. Charge Beam nerf. I kind of didn't expect this because it's just really not the build for it. Electro Drift nerf and Parabolic Charge 1 second nerf. This Pokemon was S for sure. It still may be, but I do think nerfing both of its builds might bring it more in line with an A+ choice. And I'm going to move it down there to represent that. Ceruledge, we might as well just show the Ceruledge nerfs too, because I am going to move Ceruledge here. Bitterblade nerfed, the healing decreased, the cooldown increased, Bitterblade plus nerfed, Psycho Cut nerfed, Phantom Force nerfed, cooldown increased on it. I do think nerfs across the board for this were probably fair. It was dummy good and easy to use. I'm going to move it down to A+. I don't know if it's fallen too much further than that, really, but I am going to move it. Armarouge, on the other hand, I'm not moving. I still think it is an S-tier attacker. I think they have hurt it a little bit, but I think it still has a couple builds that are top-tier builds in this game. Blaziken, I do believe, slept on with some of these other all-rounders. Now that these others have gotten nerfs, I could imagine people hop back on Blaziken. And Zacian, it did get nerfs. It got nerfs to one move here. Let me find it, just so we can take a look at the kind of change here. Sacred Sword, the defense piercing was decreased. The attack increase was decreased. Kind of weird way to say that. And then the move speed reduction was decreased. I don't know if these changes alone are enough to take it from being one of the best all-rounders in the game that is also a high skill play Pokemon. I remember talking to pro player Gotlu about this, and he is under the impression this is one of the harder Pokemon to do well with, but once you know it, it's unbelievable. I don't know if it's leaving our S tier. I want to spend a little more time with it. And then we have Darkrai. Darkrai is not leaving our God tier. Darkrai is broken. It is phenomenally busted. What a crazy, crazy thing they've created in Darkrai. I didn't expect it was going to get nerfs right away because it just got buffs, but you could probably shave off 20, 30, like the buffs were taking a move and giving it 100% damage buff. You probably could have went 60% and we would have been all right with this thing. But right now, I think it's the biggest menace in the game. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. And now it's been a minute. I think what they've done with Ceruledge is insane. These are some of the craziest nerfs I've ever seen. I'm putting it down into our C tier, almost D tier. The only nerf that's crazier, of course, is Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh's nerfs make it unplayable. This thing is completely useless right now. So I hope they actually fix it, because they've taken the legendary bird and now it is in the worst tier that I have. All right, there you go, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. We did it.